We begin today on the last line on the Vav Amud Beis. Tanan Asam, we learn from the Mishnah, Masechta Peya, which we say every morning in Brachas. Eilu Dvarim Shein Lem Shiur. These are the things that have no amount of how much it has to be done. What's the shiur of how much you have to give, which is Vapeya, the mitzvah of Peya, which is what you leave in the corners of your field for the poor people. So Rashi brings Minat Torah has no shiur, even though Midrabanan you're supposed to give a 60th of the produce of your field. The bikurim, which is the first fruits you bring to the Beis Hamikdash, the Torah says to bring the first fruits, but it doesn't say how much. V'hara'ayin, which is the main thing we're going to discuss here, which is coming to the Beis Hamikdash when you oile regal, Gemilas Chasadim, doing favors and kindness for other people, and Talmud Torah, learning Torah, also has no shiur. So focusing on Ra'ayin, which is the theme of this Masechta over here, in the beginning of the Masechta. So we thought to say the pshat of this Mishnah is that hara'ayin ein le'shir l'mayla, coming to the Beis Hamikdash, and the mitzvah of re'iyah is coming into the azara and bringing a carbon oilus re'iyah. So they thought to say that it has no shir l'mayla, meaning that you can bring as many karbanis as you want, or for every particular carbon for the oilus re'iyah you could spend as much money as you want. There's no shir for that. Aval yesh le'shir l'mata. But it does have a minimum in how small, the least of money that you should spend on the carbon that you bring. The Mishnah in the beginning of the Masechta, as we learned, said, Beis Shammai says that the carbon re'iyah should be worth two mar kesef, 2 silver coins. Beis Hillel says 1 silver coin. So it seems like that it does have a share of a minimum. Until Rabbi Yishia Berebi came along and told us pshat in this Mishnah, and he taught us hara'ayin, the mitzvah of coming to the Beis Hamikdash and bringing your carbon. Then ein le'shir minat Torah, it has no amount whatsoever, loy l'mayla, not in the maximum, v'loy l'mata, or not in the minimum. It could be as much as you want or as little as you want. Aval, so this that we learned in the Mishnah that there is a minimum. Chachamim maimrim, it's the Chachamim that said, or the Girs of the Bach is Aval Amru Chachamim. The Chachamim came along and said that Ra'iyah ma kesef, that the carbon Ra'iyah, this is according to Beis Hillel's opinion, it has to be at least 1 ma kesef, 1 silver coin, Chagigah shtei kesef. And the Chagigah that's brought in Yom Tov, which is a shlamim, that should be worth 2 silver coins.
That's the minimum?
That's the minimum, right. So the shiur that's mentioned in the Mishnah is only midrabanan, not minat Torah though. But minat Torah has no shiur, not l'mayla and not l'mata. Whatever you bring is fine.
Ksurim says the same thing.
The who?
The Amar Rabbi Yechon Ksurim said.
No, again, Kisvurin thought that even minat Torah, this shiur that we just said here, this minimum, even minat Torah, that shiur is true. So came Rabbi Yishia Berebi and explained that the shiur that we learned about in the Mishnah is not minat Torah. It's only midrabanan. Minat Torah, there's no shiur whatsoever. Now the Gemara will explain this lashon that it says v'hara'ayin. It's a very interesting lashon. My hara'ayin. What does this term mean? Rashi says that the lashon that it usually says regarding this carbon in the Mishnah over here and Bechlal is re'iyah, the carbon that you bring together with coming to be seen in the Beis Hamikdash. And Rashi here says if it would have used the term re'iyah and it would say that for the carbon re'iyah there's no shiur, then what would I say it's referring to? It's referring to the amount of money that you spend on this carbon. How big does your animal have to be? How much money do you have to spend on this carbon? $100, $1,000, $1 million. So the Mishnah is saying there's no shiur. That's if it would say re'iyah. But now that it says hara'ayin, which is a plural term and it's a different kind of a term, so what is it talking about? So Rabbi Yochanan says re'iyah spanim ba'azara. What this is saying is that in the time when a person is oile regel, he comes and he appears with his face. He comes into the azara, and a person can come during the Yom Tov as many times as he wants. There's no shiur for how many times he comes into the azara. Now the point of what Rabbi Yochanan is saying though is, he doesn't have to bring a carbon every time he appears in the azara. He can come as many times as he wants. You bring a carbon only one time. But the rest of the times you come to the azara there's no shiur. Reish Lakish says, Riyas panim becarbon. When it says hara'ayin, what it's saying is that you can come to the azara during the time that you're oile regel as many times as you want, but you always have to come with a carbon. Every time you come to the azara, you're going to have to bring another carbon. So the Gemara explains their machlokes. Be'ikar regel, the main part of the Yom Tov, in other words, the first day of the Yom Tov, kula amalei pligi, they're not arguing, the riyas panim becarbon. When you come the first day of Yom Tov, you have to bring a carbon with you. Pligi, when are they arguing? If a person's coming to the Azara again on Chalamayid, on any of the other days of the Yom Tov. So now, the Gemara explains what the machlekes is. If any time you come to the Azara and you bring with you a carbon, nobody's going to argue that we accept this carbon from him. Ki pligi, what is the argument between Rabbi Yechanan and Reish Lakish? The asa v'lo yaisi. When a person appears in the Azara again a second time during Cholamayid and he didn't bring a carbon with himself. The Rabbi Yechanan savar riyas panim ba'azara. That the word ra'ayin means you can come again and again into the Azara. The Cholaim is the asi. Every time you come, leitzarich lasuya. You don't have to bring a new carbon. As long as you brought one in the beginning on the Yontif, it's enough. Reish Lakish Amar, but Reish Lakish says riyas panim be'carbon. When you appear in the Azara again and again during Cholamayid, you always have to come with a carbon. The Cholaim is the Asi. Anytime you come into the Azara, Tzarech Lasuya, you have to come together with a carbon. That's the machlekes here. So on this, Eisver Reish Lakish le Rabbi Yechanan. Reish Lakish asked Rabbi Yechanan that said that when you come again, you don't have to bring a carbon. But the pasuk says, V'lo yiro panai reikam. You should not come and see my face empty-handed. So the simple pshat of the pasuk seems anytime you come to be Oile Regel, that's what the pasuk is speaking about, you shouldn't come empty-handed. Amalei, so Rabbi Yechanan says, no, that's not how you read the pasuk. Be'ikir haregel. That pasuk is referring only to the main part of the Yom Tov, the first day of the Yom Tov. But the rest of the Yom Tov, you don't have to bring a carbon. Eisvei, Reish Lakish asked Rabbi Yechanan from the following Braise. So the Braise here says more details about this mitzvah of the carbon that you have to bring with you when you come to the Azara. You should not come empty-handed. So the Braise says, Bizvachim. That means you have to bring a carbon, which is an animal that's brought as a carbon on the Mizbeach. So you say Reikam means that you have to bring an animal as a carbon. Maybe it just means you bring birds that are also could be brought as a carbon, or a carbon mincha as well. It's also not empty-handed. How do you know it means behema as a carbon? All medaraisa. So the Braisa explains.
As you said, there's no shiur.
Again?
You said before there's no shiur.
So that's the Gemara's question. Exactly. The Gemara is saying if it says reikam, it just says don't come empty-handed. It doesn't say in the pasuk how and what and any shiur. So maybe you should be able to bring a bird or a carbon mincha.
So then you are giving it a shiur.
Again?
So then you
no, this is a minimum. I mean, in other words, you can give or spend on it as little as possible. There's no shiur. In other words, who says it has to be dafka an animal? Maybe it could be anything. Just come to the Beis HaMikdash with something. If you pour, just bring some flour and oil. There's no. And now the Braisa says no, but that's not the case, because vidinu will make the following kal v'chaymer. Nemra Chagigah lehedyet. There's the carbon Chagigah that the hedyet brings, which every person brings, and this is a carbon which is a shlomim, and the meat of this carbon partially the hedyet himself eats. V'nemra re'iyah legavoya. And then there's a carbon re'iyah that a person brings, and this is a carbon that goes fully for the Eibishter. Ma Chagigah ho'amura lehedyet. Just like the Chagigah that is brought for the hedyet zvachim, it has to be a carbon, an animal that's brought as a carbon. And Rashi here brings the pasuk that it says by the Chagigah, la yolin chelev chagi ad baiker. You see from that carbon that it's referring to an animal. Afriiyah ha'amur ligvaya zvachim. So too the carbon oila, or the carbon re'iyah that you have to bring with you, and you shouldn't be empty-handed. It has to be a zvachim, an animal that's shechted, not a bird or flower for a carbon mincha. Now the Braisa spells out also this itself. How do we know that the carbon that you bring when you shouldn't be coming empty-handed, that this is a carbon oila, that it's fully burnt in the mizbeach? Maybe it could be a carbon shlomim that you eat part of it yourself. This carbon that you have to bring when you're oila regel, and it says lo yiro panei reikam, has to be a carbon oila, fully burnt in the mizbeach. So you say that this is an oila that's burnt in the mizbeach. Maybe this is a shlomim that part of it you could eat yourself. And vidinu, so the Gemara says that this is a kal v'chaymer. Nemra Chagigah lehedyet v'nemra re'iyah legavoya. So the carbon Chagigah, it says that every person has to bring on Yontif, and then it says this carbon that you bring with the re'iyah, with a pairing in the Azara. Ma Chagigah, so the kal v'chaymer is as follows. It's not exactly a kal v'chaymer, but it's sort of like this comparison here. Ma Chagigah ha'amura lehedyet b'roi loi. Just like in the mitzvah of the Chagigah, which the Torah says you bring a carbon that the hedyet has for it, the meat that he can eat for himself, so it's b'roi loi. You bring a carbon that part of it you can take and eat for yourself. Afri'iyah ho'amur legavoya, when the pasuk here is saying that you're bringing this as a gift for Hashem, basically, right? That's the whole point, that you're not coming empty-handed, you're giving the Eibishter a carbon. So beroi loy, this is also something which is fitting for the Eibishter, that you give it as a full gift. The entire animal is being sacrificed in the Mizbeach. And the Brisa concludes, v'chein bedin, and this makes sense that it's the right thing, it's appropriate to be done this way. You shouldn't have your table full of the meat from the carbon and full, and the table of your master, the Eibishter, the Mizbeach, should be empty because you're not burning it on the Mizbeach, you're taking it to eat for yourself. So therefore the carbon oila that you bring, and you shouldn't be empty-handed, has to be totally burnt on the Mizbeach. That's the Brisa. So Reish Lakish is saying that from this Brisa you see that when you come to the Beis HaMikdash, it's not appropriate that you should come empty-handed, that the Mizbeach should be empty. It says here that whenever you come, you should see to it that you should come and give a carbon. So this seems every time you come, not just the first day. Amalei, so Rabbi Yechanan answers again the same thing, that no, not necessarily. This only refers to the main day of the Yom Tov. On the first day, then you don't come empty-handed. But on the rest of the days, you can come to the Azara as many times as you want, and you do not have to bring a carbon with you. Eisvei, Reish Lakish asked Rabbi Yechanan a third question. It says in the Brisa, Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda says, it says in the pasuk Sholish, we say that halacha Sholish regolim bashana nitztavi Yisrael lalis beregel. 3 times a year you go to the Beis Hamikdash. Chag HaMatzos, Chag HaShavuos, v'Chag HaSukkos. And the Brisa says ve'ein nirin chatzoin. Don't appear halfway, which is something the Gemara is going to explain soon what this means. Mishum shenema kol zechurcha, that you have to come kol, fully. And then the Brisa says, "Ve'ein nidin reikonin," and you should not appear empty-handed. Mishum shenema v'lo yiro ponei reikam. Do not come empty-handed. So again, the Reish Lakish says it seems from the simple pshat here that you should not come empty-handed. So how could Rabbi Yechanan say that when you come into the Azara during Chol Hamoed again and again, you could come empty-handed? He answers him the same answer. Amalei be'ikar regel. That all refers, this Brisa as well, refers to the main day of the Yom Tov, the first day of the Yom Tov. Now, Eis for Rabbi Yechanan, Reish Lakish. Here, Rabbi Yechanan asks Reish Lakish a question. Reish Lakish says you always have to come with a carbon. You can never come into the Beis HaMikdash just without bringing anything. So he asked him the question. It says in the Brisa that in the pasuk it says Yireh, or the way it's pronounced, and the reading of the pasuk is Yeroeh, and we also read it as Yireh, which means that the Eibishter sees you, and you see the Eibishter, both. So the Brisa says as follows: Ma ani bechinam, just like when the Eibishter sees us for free. The Eibishter is not gifting us anything when he comes to see us. Af atem bechinam. So too, when you come to the Beis HaMikdash, you can come empty-handed. You can come totally for free without anything. So now this is a clear Brisa that's saying that you can come without anything. So obviously the Brisa is not referring to the first day or the first time that you come. You at least have to bring once a carbon. So what is it referring to, Rabbi Yechanan is saying? It's referring to any other additional time that you come later. If you come again, you don't have to bring any carbon. You can come b'chinam for free. So this is a raya against Reish Lakish that says that whenever you come, you always have to come with something, with a carbon. So therefore, this is taka a very strong raya against Reish Lakish. So the Gemara now goes back to the machlokes itself and reinterprets their machlokes. Ella, so therefore we're going to have to explain that the machlokes between Rabbi Yechanan and Reish Lakish was as follows. If a person comes again to the Azara and he doesn't bring a carbon with himself, nobody argues the ayol, he could enter, and he's seen there in the Beis HaMikdash, and v'nafik, he could leave without bringing any carbon. Like we just proved from this Brisa, you come b'chinam, you come with nothing. Ki pligi, so what is their argument? The asa v'aisi. If a person comes again and he brings a carbon with him. Rabbi Yechanan that said that you just have to appear. You can come as many times as you want into the Azara, but you don't have to bring a carbon again. Coming to the Azara to appear, that has no shiur. You can come as many times as you want. But harla carbon, yesh lo shiur. The carbon has a shiur. There's a maximum. You could only bring it once. More than once, we don't accept this carbon oil, even if the person will bring it. We're not going to accept it from him. If he wants to bring a donation, fine, he can bring any donation. But as a carbon oilas re'iyah for this obligation, we don't accept it a second time. Reish Lakish says, re'iyas panim becarbon, that you can appear as many times as you want with a carbon. Ta'afil a carbon nami ein lo shiur. If you want to bring a carbon again, there's no shiur. You're not obligated, because we had a raya from the Brisa before. It says you can come b'chinam, you can come without anything. But if you want to bring a carbon any additional time you come into the Beis Hamikdash, there's no shiur. You can bring as many karbanis oilas re'iyah as you want. Now the Gemara asks from another pasuk, Eisvei, the pasuk says, Hoiker raglocha mi beis reyecha. Your feet should be found seldomly in the house of your friend. So this is a pasuk, the Gemara doesn't even spell out the question, but this is a pasuk that's being used as a mashal for the Yidden and the Eibishter. Reyacha, your friend there, refers to the Eibishter, and what the pasuk is saying is that when you come to the house of Hashem, so you should be there seldomly, meaning to say that don't constantly keep on coming and bringing more gifts and another carbon and another carbon. It seems like that this is a mitzvah only once, you bring the carbon one time, and that's it. That's what this pasuk is a mashal for. So that sounds more like Rabbi Yechanan's opinion, that you could just bring one carbon and not again. So the Gemara says, according to Rish Lakish, Hasam b'chatois v'ashamais. That pasuk is saying, don't find yourself bringing a carbon chatas and asham again and again. If in order to bring a carbon chatas and asham, that's when a person sins and he has to bring this carbon. Rab Levi asked that he said there's a contradiction of two psukim that speak about karbonis. One pasuk, it says, Hoikar raglacha mi beis reyecha, that your feet, that you are coming to the house of your friend the Eibishter, so you should be seldom there. Don't find yourself bringing karbanis again and again. It's a bad sign. In another pasuk it says, Ovay beisecha bailas. I constantly come to your house, to the Beis Hamikdash, with a carbon oila. So it's saying that you should come again and again and bring a carbon oila. So the answer is, Leikashi, it's not a contradiction. Kam b'chatois v'ashamais. If a person finds himself constantly bringing a carbon chatas or asham, then that's a bad thing. And kam ba'oilas shlamim. But if a person wants to bring another oil and another shlamim, that's very good. Let him bring as many as he wants. And it says the same thing in the Brisa, Tanya namihachi, hoika raglacha mi beis reyecha, v'chatois v'ashamis akasav medaber. Don't bring karbonis chatas and asham again and again. Ata heime b'chatois v'ashamis. You say that pasuk means that you shouldn't bring a chatas and an asham again. Maybe it's saying don't bring any karbanis often. But and another pasuk it says, I bring oilis and I make vows and I bring more and more karbanis. So there it's saying that you should bring many karbanis. That's saying that you should not find yourself bringing carbon chatas and asham again and again. So therefore there's no raya against Rabbi Yochanan there. Okay, now it said ve'ein nirin chatzon chulu. I mentioned before in the Brisa, when you oile regel, do not come halfway. How do you come halfway? What is that referring to? So the Gemara explains. So Rav Yosef lemeimar, Rav Yosef thought to say, man de'isle asara banim, a person has a family, 10 children, le'lisko ha'idna chamisha ulamacha chamisha. So when you come, so a person, if it's too hard for him to bring all his children at once, don't bring 5 today and another 5 tomorrow. That's the pshat. So Abaye says Rav Yosef to Rav Yosef about this pshat. Pshita, I mean that's obvious. You don't need a pasuk to say that you shouldn't bring 5 and leave another 5 at home and then bring the other 5 tomorrow. Because Haiminayu mashvis lahu paishim, which 5 are you going to consider to be paishim, that they are sinners, that they're not deserving to come today? And Haiminayu mashvis lahu zrizin. And who are you going to consider to be zrizin, that they are going to do the mitzvah right away? In the Gears of our Gemara it says paishim, some change it to shvalim. Rashi here actually uses a different term, atzelin. Which children are you going to consider? Oh, those are the lazy ones, they can wait till tomorrow. And the other ones, they're coming today. So that's not. So why would I think that I should divide the family and only bring them half of them? Elo, so therefore Abaye says the pshat is different. When it says that you should not come halfway, it's like what Achedim said in a Brisa. We learned this before. Tanya Achedim said, a person that his job is to gather the dung from the dogs and whatever they use this for different things. A person that purifies the copper that they take out of the ground to take the dirt out of it. A person that tans the hides of animals. These are people that doing dirty work and there's a bad smell and people, they stay separate from other people. They're potter from coming to the Beis Hamikdash. Shenema, as the pasuk says, kol zechorcha. What does kol zechorcha mean? If you could join together with all of Klal Yisrael, then you come. Yatsu elu, so this excludes these people. They don't join together with everyone else. People stay away from them because of the smell, if they don't wash themselves off. and therefore you have to be in a separate group, so you're coming separately from everyone else, so you don't have the mitzvah to come. So in other words, the Gemara Abaya is teaching the words that it said before, don't come halfway meaning that you're like separated in your own group, separate from everyone else. Then you're not obligated to come.
It means all these people came up for real together?
Yeah, or at least potentially, that you have to be able to mingle together with the rest of Klal Yisrael and nobody is staying away from you. Zok Mishnah, continuing regarding the karbanis that are brought during Yom Tov when a Yid is Eileh Regel. Oilais b'mayed, so the carbon oila that you bring, and it's brought in cholamayed, bois menachulin. The carbon oila that you bring for the oilas re'iyah has to come from money which is chulin, money that's your own personal money. Ba'ashlamim, as Gemara will explain, usually any carbon or any mitzvah really that you have to do, that you have to bring, has to come from your own personal money. You can't use money that's already meiser money for this mitzvah. It has to be your money because it's a chiyuv, and the chiyuv has to be fulfilled with your money. Va'ashlamim, but the carbon shlamim, this is referring to the shlamim that you bring for the meat that's eaten, which is the shalmei simcha. For that shalmei simcha and a meiser, you can use meiser money to buy that carbon. And then there's a third carbon, Yom Tov Harishon Shel Pesach, on the first Yom Tov of Pesach, and now what this is talking about is the carbon Chagigah. So really, again, there's three karbanis that you bring when you're Eileh Regel. The Eilas Re'iyah, to appear in the Mizbeach, which is a carbon burnt in the Mizbeach, Shalmei Chagigah, which some of the meat you eat, and some goes to the Kainim, some goes in the Mizbeach, and then there's a Shalmei Simcha, an additional carbon to have more meat for the family for Simchas Yom Tov. So until here the Mishnah spoke about the carbon oilas re'iyah, then it speaks about the shalmei simcha, and then when the Mishnah says Yom Tov Harishon Shel Pesach, there's an additional carbon that you bring on the first Yom Tov on Pesach. Now the truth is it's not only Pesach, this is every Yom Tov. The Gemara will explain why the Mishnah says specifically Pesach. So there's another carbon shalmei chagigah. So that carbon, could it be brought from Meiser, or does it have to be brought from Chulin? So Bishami Yemrim min Chulin. Bishami says this is a carbon that has to be brought from Chulin. It's your obligation, so it has to come from your money. Beisilol Yemrim min Meiser. Beisilol says it could be brought from Meiser money, which the Gemara will explain why. Now the Mishnah says another halacha that Yisrael Yitzin Yidei Chayvasam, the Yidden could be Yitze their Chiyuv, and now this is going back to the carbon of the Shalmei Simcha, which is the carbon that's brought to have meat for the Simcha of Yom Tov. So you can be Yaitze, that mitzvah of Simchas Yom Tov, with the meat that you need for it, b'nedarim or nedavis. If there's any other vow that you made during the year, what happened is, any carbon that a Yid was obligated to bring to the Beis HaMikdash during the year, so they saved it for the Yom Tov time. When they were Eileh Regel, they brought all their nedarim and nedavis, or b'maisa behema, if a Yid has maisa behema that he has with him, you can be Yaitze with any of that. The truth is, it's not only Yisrael, but it refers to any Yid. Yisraelim, Leviim, Kayanim. You can be Yaitze with any of these. And the HaKayanim, they can be Yaitze, the mitzvah of Simchas Yom Tov, with the meat that they have, the Chatois, the Hashamais. Every carbon Chatas and Asham that's brought in the Beis HaMikdash, the Kayanim get a portion from that carbon. Or B'Bchair, or a B'Chair that the Kayan gets, or B'Chazah V'Shaik, B'Chlal, from all the meat from the Yidden, they have to give a section of the animal to the Kayan, which is the Chazah and the Shaik, the breast and the thigh that goes to the Kayan Gadol, or any Kayanim that is. So they can use any of those meats that for the mitzvah of Simchas Yom Tov. They don't have to spend their own private money to bring a special carbon for that meat of Simchas Yom Tov. So the Kayan, oh yeah, exactly. The Kayanim have it easier.
No, the Kayan's happy with the other guy sinning.
Oh, okay. But you can't be Yaitze, the mitzvah Simchas Yom Tov, not with a bird that you bring, and not with a carbon mincha. It has to be meat. This is one of the sources where you see that the mitzvah Simchas Yom Tov is fulfilled specifically with basar. Okay, basar behema, right. So the Gemara explains now the beginning of the Mishnah. What did it say in the first part of the Mishnah? That you bring the carbon oila on cholamayid, and it has to be brought menachulin, from your own private money. So the Gemara asks on this, Ela oilais b'mayid hu debais menachulin. It seems from the Mishnah, if you're bringing the carbon oila during cholamayid, so then it has to be brought from your own money. Ha b'yamtiv. But if you're bringing this carbon oila on the first day, which is on Yom Tov itself, then mina meiser, then it would mean that is allowed to be brought from meiser money. But amai, why would there be any distinction? Davar shebechayvihi. The point of the Mishnah is that anything which is an obligation, that you have an obligation to bring it, so then you have to bring it from your own money. It's something that could only be brought from chulin money. Makes no difference if you bring it on Yantiv or on Chalamayit. So why does the Mishnah say specifically Mayit? So maybe you'll argue and say there's a different pshat in the Mishnah. Why does it say Chalamayit? When the Mishnah says Chalamayit, what it's saying is as follows: the Oilais b'Mayit ba'is, that the carbon Oila could only be brought in Chalamayit. You can't bring the carbon Oilas Re'iyah on Yantiv. And be Yantiv Einen Bais. It can't be brought on Yantiv itself. And so then command, that would mean, according to who is this opinion of our Mishnah here, Beishamai. This is only according to Beishamai's opinion. And the Gemara brings a Mishnah, which is in Masechta Beya. We learned it. What does it say there? The Tanan, the Mishnah says, Beishamai Yaimrim, Beishamai say, Mevi'in Shlomim. On Yantif itself, you could only bring a carbon shlamim. Because the point is that on Yantif, you could only do a malacha where there's a need of eichel nefesh, where you could eat from it. A carbon shlamim, you eat from this carbon, so it can be brought on Yantif itself. But you can't do the smicha on the carbon because there's a gzeir of Chazal. You're never allowed to use or lean on an animal on any Shabbos Yantiv. So you can bring your carbon shlamim on Yantiv, but you can't do smicha. You can't bring an oila on a Yantiv, even though you have an obligation to bring an oila, but you're going to have to wait until Chalamayid because the oila you don't eat from it at all. So it can't be brought on Yantiv. But Beisil argue on both points. Mevi'in shlamim ve'oilis. You can bring a shlamim and an oila on the Yantiv itself. And also, you could also do the smicha on the behemoth itself. So now the Gemara is wondering, is our Mishnah following Beishamai's opinion? You can't say a stam Mishnah is Beishamai. We never paskin like Beishamai. So why would our Mishnah say that the Oila is only brought in Chalamayit? So the Gemara now answers and it adds into the words of the Mishnah. So the Gemara, Chasure mechsere v'achiketani. There's something missing here in the Mishnah, and this is how you have to read it. Oilais, nedarim, or nedavais. You're bringing oilais which are nedarim and nedavis. In other words, this is not the carbon re'iyah that you have to bring for the yomtiv. This is nedarim and nedavis b'chlal, different donations that a person made during the year and he's bringing now. B'mayid. So b'mayid buys. They could come only on chalamayid. That even Beisil will agree that you don't bring on the yomtiv itself only on chalamayid because it's just your own personal donation. It's not connected to the yomtiv. B'yomtiv ein buys. On the yomtiv it can't be brought. V'oilas re'iyah. But if it's the Eilis Re'iyah, which is for Yantiv, Ba Philabi Yantiv, that could be brought even on Yantiv itself. Okay, Shehi Ba, and the Eilis Re'iyah, when you bring this, this has to be brought from your own personal money. And then V'shalmi Simche, the carbon shlamim that you bring for the meat for Simchas Yantiv, Ba Inaf Mena Meiser, that you could use even Meiser money for this. And the Chagigas, Yom Tov Rishon, Shal Pesach, and there's a third carbon, which is the carbon Chagigah on the first day of Pesach, and the same any of the other Yomim Tovim. So Beishamai Yemrim and Achulin, Beishamai says that also has to be from your own personal Chulin money. Or Beisil Yemrim and Meiser. Beisil says that it has to come, it could come, that is, even from Meiser money. That's the way you have to read the Mishnah. So we're adding in some words here in the Mishnah that it's when it says Cholamayid, it was referring to your own personal donations. Those things could only be brought on Cholamayid. But the carbon oilas re'iyah for the yomtiv, that could be brought on the yomtiv itself. The Gemara brings another brayse where it clearly says it in this way. Tanya nami hachi, this is what it says in the brayse. Oilais nedarim unedavis. If you're bringing a carbon oila, which is your own donation, b'mayit, that could only come in chalamayit boys, only in chalamayit. The yomtiv ain't boys. It can't be brought on yomtiv itself. The oilas re'iyah, the oilas re'iyah, which is brought for the oilas to be oila regal on yomtiv, ba for the yomtiv, that could come even on yomtiv itself. And when you bring this carbon, it has to be from your own personal money. The Shalmi Simcha, the boy Nafmin Meiser, the Shalmi Simcha could be brought even from Meiser money, and the Chagigah Yantiv Rishon Shal Pesach, and the carbon Chagigah that you bring on Yantiv, Beishamai Yomrim min Achulin. Beishamai says it comes from Chulin, or Beisil Yomrim min HaMeiser, and Beisil say that it's brought from Meiser.